storm, visibility, praying. It's like 4 hours.
Speaking of conference, and the last day, couples decide to take a bus ride.
And Matt and Ted are going to call for a few minutes.
Again, there it was probably, October, and in the middle of Denver, there was 8 or 10 inches of snow on the ground. We got up in the mountains, we're really going through a lot of snow.
3 degrees every 1,000 feet. You get up there. John, how you doing? You get up there. Good, Chuck. How are you? It's a different ballgame. Oh, well.
It was you we're talking about. You see the playback. Vividly, that was the day. That was September 9th, 2001. And September 10th, I flew in New York. And Kathleen picked me up, and the next day, it was a good day to be in New York.
Yeah, Rich and I were due to head to Chicago the 11th in the morning. I was down at his house and watching television. We were leaving for the airport. Mary called me and said, "Hey, I'm going here."
I was on my way to China.
Yeah, Matt.
Let's see.
Something's going on. Man, yep. There was a couple sitting next to me. We went from Denver to Atlanta and up. And they had just been married. And her father had given them a trip to New York City. And they had planned, I always wanted to plan to go down to the Wall Street area the next day, which would have been Monday, Tuesday. Oh my goodness, you wonder what happened. The goal was to go up to the top of the Trade Center, take a view.
I did that for just finished, just graduated from Lehigh. Hershey was a courier in there for one of the big firms, and ended up on a picnic table. Great, they gave them 6 months off to go to counseling. Now I've got 2 sons working there. I worry about it. 2 sons and a daughter in Manhattan.
It's a Braven grad.
Everyone's
working for.
Hey, Ed. Hey. Hey, buddy.
You got some training.
I made it.
California, conducted your training.
Yeah, I heard it.
Just on the 7th floor, just went down on the 40th floor for coffee. When he felt the impact, he thought he was actually in the building. He thought it was an earthquake.
Cantor Fitzgerald just had a big one. They were Cantor Fitzgerald and San Antonio.
Managed to big fund for the crew.
I was thinking the other day, he was in the road out there.
Building 7.
Yeah.
But he was down in California.
That was pretty good. I was able to do something.
Connie likes the,
Who said, get home? He said, you can't get
I
home.
would say
There's no buses. The buses are full. Trains are booked. There's certain no plates. They said, I can't rent a car. They said, go buy a car. So we bought a car and drove it home.
3 days to get back, right?
You wanted to see it?
Regulations still here.
No.
oh, so my one is good enough.
See what I mean?
No, 180,000.
It's only through July.
He was in.
That's only through July.
His office was in Building 7. And the first bomb occurred, and he was out of town. He was out of town for that.
It's everything.
When I was picked up at the hotel. St. Cathy. And he was buzzing. And we had all music playing, we talked about the music and what he liked about it and so on. And I thought, who knows?
Yeah, right.
I thought about that a couple times. Didn't realize it could be anybody.
You would have been really early. This is my first meeting, so. What'd you say?
I worry Sam on the 48th floor of JP Morgan's building. Chad's at CBS's building is on the 34th floor or something.
That's why we don't.
Which one are you looking at? Mary was worried about.
Of what?
Now it could be just as bad, leaving church and going to the parking lot.
Yeah.
friend of mine was going to meet me in Denver, in Detroit that day. He took a different plane. He was headed to Pittsburgh. Of course, I was going in. So the plane landed in Pittsburgh. Said everybody out of the airport. I want to go to Eastern Pennsylvania. I have to call my company. I said,
That Dallas to Ontario. Wow. That's what those are three.
Yeah. I didn't get to see it. That's fine. I'll try to stay on it. I'll just put it this way, I'll let Mike call out the agenda instead of taking control.
Right.
Hey, how you doing? How are you? All right. I got your second reply, so I understand.
Yep.
Yeah, it kind of bounced out because we got a little bit on the GA under, the other one breaks even, the
I
other
think
one.
pretty close, yeah.
Yeah, okay, got it.
You get a general feel, and you can walk through that, but, I'll be here, I'll let you kind of,
Okay.
now chime in as needed.
Michael, how are you? Make sure I navigate the minefields pretty well.
Oh, okay. You got
And when I
that.
see a clear one, I'll be like, and here's Todd.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
That's my favorite MASH episode. There's an orphan walks out in the minefield in Korea, right? And Hawkeye wants to walk out and save him. And they give radar gives the map of the minefield. Take a left 2 steps, right 3 steps. It's halfway up there. He goes, the other colonel walks up and says, "Hawk, get that thing upside down." And
That was the other one, they had the bomb in the compound. Pull the wire from the housing. Pulls out. But first, take the fuse out.
I was watching a show a couple weeks ago about Korea. Ridiculous and foolish steps we took that got us into trouble in Korea. And now I'm watching the PBS show on Vietnam.
I'm watching it. Good one.
And I realized why I was angry
Put down on the list too.
in 1969. Oh, yeah.
I saw that a lot of our ex-enemy interviewing those that were officers.
Staff actually does serve on HADC's board. Basically, woman come house you in Denver. All of your money. I was once a month.
Absolutely.
It really does kill.
It's
Potatoes.
it's interesting to see.
Office smells great.
I taught was teaching a class on Strauss with communication. And one of the things we want people to do is to look at new forms of communication and challenges the opportunities they present to us. And a young man brought in his laptop early on in my information like Skype.
You're getting
He hooked up with his brother and sister-in-law who were hiking their way through Vietnam.
That's true. Always is cheaper to cook.
And it was just absolutely fascinating. Because they were in Ho Chi Minh City, and they're walking down the street, and there are stores,
Of course, Vikings.
and there are cars, and there are motorbikes, and
12 barrels. Convection.
it looks easy and happy, and
Sub-zero.
colorful, and everybody seems to be enjoying life. I thought,
Gotta be keg of beer, so.
did we ever screw up? Because
Travel destination.
everything we thought about, we're told, didn't come to fruition. And we only sent 60,000, 55,000 Americans to the
Johnson had such paranoia about all around us. politically, it's almost the House of Cards. It's all politically.
Well, no, it is in for a penny, in for a pound. You know, you're thus far in, thus far in. So get the back.
Hi, good to see you, Brian. It's okay.
I'm not sure where to go from there. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming out at 5 this evening so that we can have an opportunity to experience both the different times, perhaps open ourselves up to a few more people from the public. But again, welcome, and would you all please stand and we'll pledge allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Well, I was in the pulpit, I'd say please be seated, but that's so that would you conduct a roll call for us?
Yes, sir. Ann Baum. Brian Dames.
Yes.
Ann is here.
Ann is here, okay.
Welcome, Ann.
Brian Dames.
Here.
Chuck Dicon.
Here.
Mike Dowd.
Here.
Frank Facciano.
Here.
Glenn Geisinger. John Hayes.
Here.
Larry Hemberger. Neil Copeland. Ed Lozano.
Here.
Jeff Matskin. Ted Rosenberger.
Here on the phone.
Welcome, Ted.
Mike Schwer.
Here.
Matt Turk.
Remotely present.
Welcome, Matt.
And Christopher Worley.
Hello.
Welcome, everybody, and again, thank you very much for joining us this evening. Did Frank coach you on saying Frank Facciano, so you got all the appropriate accents in?
Yes.
Many times.
Frank, welcome. We're glad to have you with us.
Glad to be here.
I think most people know you, but want to give us a really quick note about yourself?
Because I'm chewing right
Sure.
now. So thank you. Frank Facciano, I am the COO of the Greater Lehigh Valley Chamber of Commerce. I am a lifelong resident, except for a few years, of Lehigh County, Allentown in particular. Live inside South Whitehall now. Cut my teeth after I got out of the Army and then college, working at the Sheridan Jetport, where when the crews landed, somebody had to go get them. So we often chipped in, picked up the flight crews, took passengers back and forth. I remember the German gentleman from Bosch coming to the front desk and saying, "Take me to Abe." Kick out of that. And been active on, when I was in the hotel business, I was a volunteer at the Chamber, volunteer on the LVEDC Marketing Committee, the Convention and Visitors Bureau at the time. Just always had a thing for this airport, and I think as much as anybody I know what a valuable asset this is to the Valley, and I'm happy to serve.
Thanks, Frank. Welcome. We're glad to have you with us, and I've known Frank, I think, first through a Leadership Lehigh Valley program, and then later through the Chamber and so on. I've always enjoyed working with him, and so welcome to the authority of the Board of Governors. Do we have opportunity for public comment? Do we have anybody in the public who would care to address the authority? Again, thank you very much. Then let us move on to the approval of the minutes, and then I do want to make one change in the agenda if we might. So we have the minutes of the August 8th board meeting that were distributed. And do we have any additions or corrections to those? We have a motion to accept them first.
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Any additions or corrections? All those in favor then of adopting them as distributed, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The special board meeting on August 17th. Those meetings were also distributed to you by electronically. A motion to accept those minutes as distributed.
Moved. So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Was that a?
Aye.
Was an aye. All right. Thank you. I know that, like, if we would all agree, I'd like to have the opportunity to move the election of officers to this point in the agenda, because I know one of the people may have to absent rather quickly. That is to elect a representative of Lehigh County to the Executive Committee. And by Schwery, do you have a nomination to make?
Yes, I'll nominate Matt Jurek.
Okay. Do we have a second to that?
Second.
Then this would be a motion only for the Lehigh County people to vote upon. So all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Then welcome. We're glad to have you with us, and thank you very much. I think
We're excited to be part of the team.
I think the expertise you bring in the field of economic development, particularly as we begin charting our course with, I think we counted out 8 or 9 real estate projects that are confronting us right now. And Chuck and I sat down with Tom a few minutes ago. It is kind of an imposing schedule of stuff to get done. So we appreciate your expertise. Then let's move back to the agenda. And Ed Rosano.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone, and I'll give the treasurer's report. Pretty consistent would be my opening comments, and when we get into the detail, I'll remind everyone that we're nearly towards the end of the third quarter, so we got 2 out of the 3 months completed in the third quarter, so we're almost at the home stretch into the fourth quarter. So these figures are for the month of August. As you can clearly see, we did around $2.2 million in revenues, which is 8% ahead of last year and 2% ahead of budget. So we've been fairly consistent, and I give staff tremendous credit for being very accurate on their projections, both from a budget target standpoint and from delivering against previous year. Expenses have always been managed very well and continue to do so this month. So expenses were down to up to 1.43, which is below budget, which is actually a positive, of course. So the target was closer to 1.5. Staff delivered at 1.43. So that's great, keeping the costs in line. Depreciation, fairly consistent, 4% ahead of last year, right under budget at -1%. And so our net income is slightly below last year, but that was projected in the plan, and still ahead 27%. So for the month of August, we delivered $413,000. And when I opened with the consistent comment, it's been pretty much the same theme from January through now. The performance has been good expense management, increased revenue due predominantly to Allegiant increases and cargo increases, slight shortcomings on the parking due to slight nominal decreases in the commercial traffic. And we'll go into a little bit detail later. Outside of that, it's been a very consistent theme, and as you can see again, on the top line and the bottom line, we've been ahead of plan, which is great. So if we go to the next chart, I won't even go into too much detail here other than give you the headline numbers. So almost 3/4 of the year through, we're $17.3 million, again 7% ahead of budget and 23% ahead of last year. And if we drop down to our net income number, we practically have almost doubled what our expectations were for year to date. So we're at $2.9 million in net income. Our plan, as you can see, was 1.5. So very good performance, 46% ahead of last year, with 4 months left to go. And again, just reiterating, Allegiant, solid performance, growth, parking, which has been slightly soft, tied to the commercial airlines. Cargo, of course, has been driving the bulk of that growth with all the downstream services that come with it. Good expense management, and hence, again, $2.9 million in net income, 91% ahead of budget, and 46% ahead of last year. Now, we added in a chart, and Todd was kind enough to put this in. We've been discussing, let's drill down a little bit and find out, from a more detailed perspective, where our revenue and kind of gross margin comes from, because not all kind of economic sectors are created equal, right? Certain areas are a little higher profit, certain a lower profit, et cetera. But what you can see from here is a couple of things. I would point out that, number one, as you can see, our largest revenue driver is parking and roadways. We talked about that a lot. It's very important to our business, and from an operating revenue standpoint, it represents, number two, 2.9 million, okay? So up until this year, that was our main driver, because it was tied to the commercial traffic and because it's a pretty large revenue center. This year, what's taken over is ground handling tied to, our cargo business, and you're at 3.8 million. So if you look at now, where our top line revenue comes from, the main areas are ground handling at 3.8 million, parking and roadway 2.9, followed closely by aviation services, okay? Now, from a net margin standpoint, that's a gross number. From a net margin standpoint, you could see that one of the most profitable drivers of our business right now is parking and roadways. So not only was our most important top-line driver, it's still our most important bottom-line driver from a gross margin standpoint. So 71% gross margin. By the way, this doesn't necessarily have all of the expenses and allocations and admins factored in. We're just looking at it purely from a 40,000-foot standpoint. We are going to drill down a little deeper, and by the end of the year, we hope to have some pretty detailed analysis so you can see top line, net, gross margin, expenses, net margin, net income. But just a quick snapshot again is 2 million. And by the way, our net number, as you recall, was 2.9 million year to date, is coming from parking and roadway. So obviously a very important driver. Almost $1 million is coming from aviation services at 34% gross margin. Advertising, obviously a very profitable business, thanks to our team for really taking it in-house and not increasing the expense, and making it even more profitable than it was. Small part of our pie, but nonetheless a profitable part, and so on. So quick snapshot of top line, gross margin, how it relates to the bigger pie. Again, we're at 2.9 million. So if you add up the numbers over here, you say, well, Ed, that adds up to roughly $5 million on a net income basis, but our net income is 2.9 million. Numbers don't add up. Well, remember, this doesn't have all the expenses in there, and it doesn't have the admin, which is a pretty big chunk. It's about 2 million and change. So if you add back in the admin, which we will, and then hopefully we'll allocate it on some sort of, algorithm basis that says, it's either a percentage of revenue or a percentage of resource used, et cetera, we will be able to then get to a very close, accurate net income number. But this kind of gives you just, again, a little bit of a 40,000-foot top-line standpoint. So new chart, new information. Any questions, Todd and I are happy to answer.
And can we assume that aviation services and ground handling, there's not a whole lot of difference there, but the ground handling as we know it today is the cargo piece?
Todd, how?
Correct?
Ground handling is also the Allegiant, the handling, the ground handling for Allegiant.
Okay, that's what I want to know.
Allegiant is actually up more than the cargo.
Okay, so when we revert back to aviation services, that would now be the FDO?
Right, the fueling.
Fueling and whatever, okay.
The icing, those types of things.
Now, we don't have GA in here just yet. GA, for all intents and purposes, you can right now factor in as break-even, nominal subsidization of the revenue. So it's not a big piece of the pie at this point from a net income standpoint. But we want to get a little deeper into how do we allocate those expenses, et cetera. It's a pretty decent chunk of revenue, but not net income.
Okay, would that stand alone, or would it be separate from aviation services and ground handling?
That stands on its own.
Standalone, right?
Brian? Question on the parking and roadway. Parking's pretty straightforward. Can you help me understand the roadway just a little bit better?
That's a good question, Todd.
Yeah, it's all part of the same piece. There is no separate fees for the roadway, but it's just part of that cost center. So
the costs go to
maintenance of
maintain the
essentially our
roadway.
terminal roadway infrastructures.
Okay.
Parking is revenue, roadway,
His expense.
you have to carry the expenses, and that's where they get lumped.
Correct.
I was just wondering if there was some income we were getting on.
Toll road, put a toll out there.
Good idea. Revenue that we generate from our new contracts with Lyft and Uber,
That would be under parking.
and the parking and roadway, all right.
Yep. Great. So again, we'll get a little bit more detail. This is a first cut, and even things like that. Does it make sense to continue to, on the nomenclature side, call it roadways, et cetera? We can address those. But I thought it was a good first cut by Todd and the team on trying to give us a little bit of a snapshot of revenue and gross margin and net income. There's another interesting thing that we looked at, and what this is meant to kind of let you know is historically, so we're starting down at the bottom, 2012 actual, which is the total revenue line. And if you look at 2017 actual, and again, this is August year to date, you'll see the progressive growth of our revenue. And you'll see that, it's grown pretty steadily. There's a nice little bump that's taken place over the last year, and that is, again, principally driven by our pretty significant increase in cargo. But what's nice here is that, our revenue is growing steadily, and our net income as a percent of revenue is somewhat consistent. You're looking at it in the low teens, right? You're seeing 14, 15, 10, 18, 12, et cetera. So while our revenue is growing, our net income has been growing fairly consistently. However, if you look at the personnel cost, the growth as a percentage of our revenue is a little bit exponentially higher. And that's what I think Todd has been sharing, and management and staff has been sharing with the board, in that our expenses are outpacing the other areas of growth. For example, healthcare costs are going up. We're not recuperating that because, unlike revenue, we can charge more or we can get more cars into the parking lots. Healthcare, we're just absorbing that entire cost, and that cost is outpacing our revenue growth, our net income growth. Also, some of the pension costs that we were talking about, et cetera, they're going up at an exponentially higher rate than our revenue and net income. So I think what this is highlighting, if you look at 2012 at 34%, and last year at 43%, and this year, budget was 48. Staff has done a good job of keeping it a little lower, but something's got to give sooner or later. We just can't keep this trajectory going. So either we got to reduce the personnel expense as a percent of revenue somehow, or we got to dramatically start increasing our revenue stream, or we're going to start seeing a decline in our net income line. So there's a lot of levers that are in play here, but just again wanted to give you a little bit of a snapshot that the revenue is going pretty steady, net income is holding up pretty nice, but there's a lot of work being done to keep that net income line going, and with personnel costs outpacing revenue and net income growth, we're going to have to address that pretty soon. Questions? Yeah.
When we drill down on when you go to the next level, can we get an actual breakout on that, on how labor costs, meaning the actual wage versus the benefit costs as a percentage? Or is that, am I asking way too much?
No, we know what that number is. It's about 65% for every full-time employee. For every dollar we spend on salary, we spend about 65 cents on benefits, not counting time off.
Well, my guess is, based on the experience that we're having in other places, if we take a look, you're talking about 34 to 42%, probably the labor cost itself really isn't that much out of line.
Correct.
It's the benefits package that's driving that thing, and that's what I'm trying to get a feel for.
We'll talk about that.
We'll talk a little bit more about that, in fact, in an executive session later. But
no, that's a great observation, and let's get into that level of detail. And what I'd like to see is a CAGR line that says how much of this is just pure headcount increase, salary increase, and how much of it is expenses. And I'm pretty certain the expenses will be CAGR line will outpace the headcount / resource line. So, and that's a great insight. So that's what we're trying to do now, is again transition from just basic top line reporting, aircraft poundage, to a little bit more strategic detail. I thought there was a question over here on the side.
For those of us who have been around for a while, the level of detail, and I think not just detail, the level of insight is significant, and I really do appreciate it. I think Ed and Todd have become a good team, and really gives us a much better handle of where we are financially than we've ever had in the past.
Thank you, Mike. And
it's really much simpler. It's much easier than going through 40 pages of all the checks we wrote and so on that we did on occasion, so I appreciate that. And I remember people who did that. Why do we pay?
Oh, we are actually going to get on one of those pages shortly, so we're not going to totally get away from that. I keep reminding Todd it's our fiduciary responsibility to, check the checks and check the checker. But of course, we're confident that everything is being managed well. But that is a key part of our fiduciary responsibility.
It's good that the staff has been responsive.
Yep. Now, on the air traffic, commercial traffic note, we were flat for the month at 67,000 passengers versus the 67.6 of last year. Still slightly down, but you look at the trends. 0.4 here, 2% here. Nothing to necessarily get too nervous about. But the flip side is, we talked about this at our last board meeting, is we're going to start drilling down into what is driving the majors decline, albeit on a relatively nominal basis, but nonetheless, we want to see positive numbers. We obviously don't want to see. We're seeing positive numbers in all the other areas, cargo, Allegiant, et cetera. So we'll crack this code. But the good news is there is no real strong pattern here that says, the wheels are falling off or anything like that. So we're going to continue to monitor it. And at this point, we're thankful that it's nothing significant at this point. And again, we'll get to the bottom of it shortly for you. Cash flow, we try to simplify this chart a little bit. I think it's pretty consistent from our last board meeting. Todd, is there anything you want to highlight here, that significant change notable from our?
No, I think we've been pretty consistent in our cash flow.
Yeah.
We have some, about another $2 million or so left on the multimodal that we paid in the next couple of months. So.
Okay.
But that's all factored into the cash flow.
So we're pretty much on plan to what we projected earlier on in the quarter and in the months. We'll continue to put this chart up for a little bit. Again, it's our kind of asset versus expenses, liabilities, should I say, ratio, and we're in a much stronger position than we were, as you could see, in January, February, March of last year. And we don't expect any significant changes. Cash flow is pretty good. We're hitting our projections as planned, so we don't see any surprises at this point that would change this ratio significantly. So, and one thing I did want to highlight, you have it in your packets. Every month, staff puts together a kind of a checkbook summary of our major expenses, and it's in stack ranked order. If I recall correctly, we wrote a couple of major checks out to suppliers, probably in the vicinity of $900,000. It is in your packet, and I just wanted to give you an example of, as a board and as our fiduciary responsibility, we need to make sure that those amounts we're cognizant of, and that they're appropriate expenses. And there's no doubt in my mind, and I don't think it will be in your mind, but we occasionally will be checking those figures. The figure that you'll see in this packet, again, close to $900,000, is the expense that was associated with, on a monthly basis, with the multimodal project. So when you see the authority wrote out a check to the contractor in that statement, that's for multimodal expenses. Okay, and I think, Todd, what's the balance left on that?
About $2.1 million.
About 2.1. Okay, so we'll probably see 2 more months worth of significant $800,000, $900,000 expenses, and then you'll see that top line item kind of fading off into the sunset as we've wound down the expense of the multimodal project, and we'll just, again, we'll keep updating you on anything that's out of the ordinary, that's significant. But Ryan does a great job, and Todd and staff do a great job of keeping track of those figures and making sure that, we're on plan. And by the way, just to close out that point, if we ever are significantly off, the board is required to provide approval of any major deviance. So if, let's just say that $800,000 budget number came in at $950,000 for the month. staff would come to us at an executive committee meeting in anticipation of that and seek approval for that $150,000 release. You haven't seen it because there hasn't been a need. It's been on plan. So just wanted to let you know that we are keeping an eye on that, and they are major expenses, and that's a big part of our responsibility. So with that, I will close and just say again, a good month, pretty much almost a good quarter, wrapping it up.
Mike?
Just a question, because I saw you on the list of checks. There was probably combined about $100,000 going to Catasauqua School District between the pilot and the, what I'm assuming is a regular payment. What are our taxable properties for property taxes?
That, the one for Catasauqua, that is for parking. We
Okay,
pay-
that's strictly the
that's
parking itself.
Payment in lieu of taxes, we
Okay.
pay that, yeah.
I have two questions very briefly. One just more a comment than a question. The passenger traffic concerns me a little more than it might use, so I'm curious what you find out as we go forward.
Yep.
Not necessarily from a financial standpoint, but as that passenger traffic declines, what Frank had said about the airport being an asset in terms of business recruitment to the valley becomes much more of a challenge in that regard. So I'm curious what you uncover over the next couple of months. And then second, we've got a lot wagered, for lack of a better term, on Allegiant. Allegiant performs decently, it seems, just looking on a very superficial level.
Yep.
Do we do any financial analysis, or Todd, do you do any financial analysis on Allegiant?
As far as,
Just their financial strength, their financial condition, because of the importance of the role they play to our operations. Now, just a complete surface, they look good, but
I mean, as far as financial analysis, I don't know we do, but I can tell you that they're financially sound. I mean, they are truly one of the most profitable airlines that there is. So, I mean, they've been profitable for 50-some straight quarters now, I believe, something like that, maybe even longer. So, yeah. So you're right, we do. We certainly have a lot of our service eggs in that basket for sure. But yeah, they're
it's a good basket there.
yeah, I mean, they've been a good partner, and they are certainly not. Obviously anything can happen, but we wouldn't expect to see them go away anytime soon.
the airline industry, unfortunately, has a long track record of airlines going sideways very quickly.
Absolutely. We've had
Experienced
many of them
Yeah,
here,
exactly.
unfortunately,
So,
but Allegiant
maybe
is,
something
they've
just
been
to keep
around
in
a while.
mind.
They've been on the East Coast for 12 years, so.
I think we circulated a news story to the Board of Governors relative to Allegiant and their plans in Wilkes-Barre, and they're closing that down. I think that presents us with a remarkable opportunity to begin marketing in that part of the state and acquiring some of those people to come down and fly out of, as Frank would say, out of Abe.
And I think that's a good point in the sense of we shouldn't take it lightly. We aren't. What I just want to highlight is that there doesn't seem to be, at least with the majors, any significant trend that looks like, hey, things are falling apart, i.e., 6, 8, 10% negative CAGRs month on month. That is becoming a long-standing trend. And I think, John, that if we loop in Allegiant, because we separate those out from that chart, overall, the growth is actually positive. It's unfortunate that the major carriers are declining slightly. And as we've mentioned, we have to figure out how do we turn that tide. And I think above and beyond that, while Allegiant is, when you add it into the total pie, making it a growth story, albeit not a huge growth story, but nonetheless a growth story, we are starting to be a little bit optimistic about some of these regional plays potentially factoring in as well. I think a Boston opportunity, a Pittsburgh opportunity, one of those sooner or later is going to fall in our lap positively, and hopefully that'll reinvigorate our turnaround, right? So, yeah, we're gonna look into it. And I think it's a great point, John. We should be cognizant of it and go deeper.
So I have a motion to accept the treasurer's report as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded.
All right. All those in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
All those opposed?
Yes.
Again, and thank you very much, Todd. Thank you very much. I know you guys are working hard together, so we really do appreciate that. Let's move along to executive committee, and let me add just one note. Tom and I and Colin, actually a lot of the staff, appeared both at Northampton County Council and Lehigh County Commissioners within the past month, and I would have to say that the response from both governing bodies was remarkably positive. Mike and Glenn, thank you for being excellent hosts. You set the stage well for us, and the response from both bodies I thought was very, very positive. The video that Colin put together I think set the stage well, but we had quite a few. Todd was there, and Darren, I think you were, no. Todd was there, Colin was there, and I think Eddie made the presentation in Northampton County. I think it's important for us to show up and to have that sense of visibility. So thank you for that. In both cases, I thought Tom handled himself remarkably well in front of the audience, and I think acquitted himself exceptionally well. So thank you.
And Mike, if I may, I just want to add really quickly that Mike, having been present at the meeting, Mike did a great job of, I think, reestablishing our kind of presence and credibility with county council. The audience was positive. I think you did a great job of supporting Tom and staff there, and I think the story was much better presented with the PowerPoint presentation. I thought the team did a great job, and so hats off to you, Mike, as well, for doing a great job there.
The other thing I'd say is thank you to the staff for is the event we had at Braden, and the fly-in and movie night was just a phenomenal night and a great success. We had quite a few board members who did show up for that, and I know Eddie brought AJ, his son, and they were having a good time. I saw kids doing cartwheels and all over the field. So it was the situation, the physical facility certainly attributed itself very well. By the way, Mayor Panto has said anytime we want to use the city screen and city projector, he'd be more than happy to donate that for us. And I think that kind of cooperation would be beneficial. But again, I thought well done, and it gave us a good chance to show Braden off. I think it's very, very best. It was kind of cool to see planes take off and land. Couldn't do it during the movie, but certainly we could do it beforehand, and it was a nice evening.
And the bowling match 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, that's right. So it had some good exposure to the public across the face of the organization. I think that's a strong plus for us.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
one other event this coming weekend is the Scout Weekend.
That's right.
And there will probably be 120 scouts there getting free airplane rides this weekend. So nice.
I think every event we can do like that is tremendous. Last summer we had the event at Queen City, and I think we ought to consider doing something like that again. I realize that becomes an all hands on deck experience for the staff, but I think the PR we get is wonderful. I love watching the kids climb up and down on the snow removal equipment, and all that is just really good, and it makes friends for us that we always need. So again, thank you very much. Brian, thanks for bringing that up, because I've forgotten about that, and that's another opportunity for us to pump GA and pump pilots. I think is terrific. Next issue under Executive Committee is the approval of the acquisition of 121 and 131 Willowbrook Road, and I think Darren will lead us through that discussion.
Sure, thank you, sir. So do you want to put the graphic up that's on the bottom there? So during our purchase of right-of-way properties for the FedEx project, we were able to acquire several properties over on Ray Street, Willowbrook. So basically these on this side, all of this in blue that you see in the front that was acquired as part of that project. So we've had the opportunity to speak to the owners of the 2 properties in the back there in green, and both interested in selling their properties, so we've made them offers. These properties, they're eligible for AIP grant funds because they're on our Exhibit A to be acquired. So we're able to use the money that's in the account from the FedEx sale to fund this. We have to make up the local share, as well as there's a little bit of a premium we're paying on one of them. So all total, to acquire these properties, it's about $21,800 out of LNAA operating funds. The rest will be funded out of the AIP fund. Now, the interesting thing that's kind of happened since we met with the exec committee, this piece of property here is actually part of this parcel, which we did not know when we were doing this, because we hadn't gone through all of the title work and everything. So we actually will be getting all of that. So the one that we thought was going to be the holdout that was going to be a bit of an issue for us isn't an issue any longer. I mean, that will certainly bear itself out when we get the final title report, so we'll actually have that whole corner will be ours then, and there's really only sort of 2 more properties out here that we would probably look to at some point acquire if they became available on that end, but those are all important for us for future growth for the airport. I don't think we have any immediate plans for them, but there could be potential for some aviation or non-aviation uses there. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but.
So the people that reside there now, will they be our tenants?
No, they were the. One is a rental property, and we'll give them a period of time before they'll have to vacate, and then the other one is they're moving. They're looking to move on. So
There's no plans to rent these properties at all?
now we actually will look to probably demolish the structures in the next, hopefully sometime next year. We'll look to do that as part of our capital
We
plan.
demolish because properties in blue haven't been demolished yet, have they?
No, some of those will get, if you want to put it back up so that I can show, there are two of them. So these first two on the corner over here, this one and more than likely this one are going to get demolished as part of the road work, as well as the barn over here and these couple little outbuildings. Those are all going to go away as part of the road work. The rest we'll look to, like I said, add to probably our capital plan for next year to demolish them.
So on behalf of the executive committee, I'll move that we proceed with the acquisition of those properties, the total cost to LNAA of $21,800, right? So moved. You have a second? All right. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Any opposed, say yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Chuck, you had a comment with regard to access to those properties and so on, and since we are in the middle of our strategic plan, do you want to make a comment about that?
It was just that we get out in front of the real estate and take a look at the potential, John, the future uses of the property, not only demolish the structures, but we also look at a potential access road to open up lands that we own to the south that can be corporate hangar, commercial, et cetera. So instead of just making the acquisition, which is a great play and very reasonable, but also take a look at the road that cuts through there and what that might open up for us to start doing some preliminary engineering to kind of get out in front of this and know what we've got potentially. So,
From a conversation with Tom, since we're in the middle of our own strategic plan, being funded, in fact, by the FAA, we really should take advantage of making sure that plan is at least looked at on the site, so that we don't find ourselves in 2 years saying, by the way, we'd like to do something over here, and at least begin letting that be known as a possibility for us in the future. All right, thank you. Moving on. I think this is still you, Darren?
Yeah, I'm just going to
You're on for a while, so why don't you just stay there.
All right, so that again, if you go to the bottom and open up the attachment, I think that will help a little bit. This attachment, this is the right one. This one will help us out a little bit with the next couple. What we're looking at now is, we still have a few properties that are under an option agreement with Rockefeller. That's what we call Lot 4 and Lot 5, and then we have Lot 6 over here in East Allen Township. Tonight we're going to talk about Lot 4 and 5. To sell Lot 5, we're actually looking, they needed some stormwater area there for the project. That's right in our flight path for runway 1331, so selling that is not necessarily an option to us, so we need to protect that. We've been able to work out a deal with the Rockefeller Group to go ahead and purchase that easement. So they're purchasing it basically for the same price per acre as they would if they were buying the property outright, so it's just an easement. Easement has all of our traditional reversionary language in it, all of our abrogation language in it, so if they, for whatever reason, abandon that easement, it actually does come back to the authority. So the total purchase price, it's $44,000 an acre or $459,000 is what they pay for the easement itself. And it's obviously important for us to sell the easement before we can even consider selling Lot 5. They won't be able to buy Lot 5 without purchasing the easement as well. And as we ask for a motion, I would ask this to be moved contingent upon final review of the solicitor and staff, because we are still working out some final language pieces with Rockefeller on the easement. But
And there'll be underground detention pond, right?
Underground detention. There's actually three things in the easement. It's an underground detention, a small piece of their roadway around the building actually creeps into the easement, and then there's so there's the curb for that and a guardrail, but very minimal as far as the road and everything goes.
settlement timing?
Looking probably November timeframe sometime. That's what it sounds like at this point in time. They are required to settle by December 17th or forfeit their option, so I'm pretty confident it'll be before December 17th. Let's
So
put
we
it
can
that
make
way.
Todd happy again?
Should make Todd pretty happy.
So you're looking for a motion to grant the easement, subject to final review by solicitor?
By solicitor and staff, I would say, yes.
So moved.
So we have a motion by John, do we have a second?
One quick question. Any thoughts as to the use of the cash? Is there general?
It's got to go into restricted AIP funds, so it has to be for additional AIP funds.
Okay.
Any other questions? Then all those in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Any opposed? Excellent. So Todd, Darren, keep on going.
All right, so the next one is, this is just more of an administrative matter. This is approval of closing resolution. So we need the board to provide a resolution that gives our interim director or an executive director at the time, depending on where we're at the time of closing, the authorization to sign all the closing documents. So it's really just, like I said, it's an administrative matter. We've done this in the past with the other sales that we've done, so we're just looking for that.
Ron, you got something prepared for us?
Well, yes, I've circulated a resolution which in effect does that. It's a housekeeping matter. There have been prior resolutions which have authorized executive director to sign on behalf of the authority. Just because Tom has the title of interim executive director, we thought to touch all bases, we would have a resolution making clear that those prior resolutions that apply to executive director also apply to the interim executive director. So it's really just a housekeeping matter.
Are there, just a quick question, is, refresh my memory, are there any capital max outs on this? Or it's, as long as it's approved by the board?
Yeah.
This is just signing the closing, this is for the sales, the documents for sale, for the sale of these properties. So it's just to sign all the closing documents at that. There's no purchase, no outlay of cash.
Have a motion? Glenn, a second?
Second.
Eddie? Any other questions? All those in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Any opposed?
Yes.
Excellent. So keep on going.
All right, so we got one more. If you want to throw that first graphic back up so that may help a little bit. But at any rate, this is just, as I talked, we're looking to amend the agreements of sale for Lot 4 and Lot 5. So the way these agreements of sale were drawn up was that closer to closing, which we're getting to now, everything will be appraised again to determine what the final value would be. So there was a small adjustment on Lot 5 in the acreage when we went to the easement, so there was a small, that's slightly different than the original purchase and sale agreement. And then we got to the $44,000 per acre for each of those. So it's, Lot 4 is $954,000 and Lot 5 is $3,060,000. All total, we're just over $4 million for those two properties. So just looking to approve the amendments to those purchase and sale agreements, and then hopefully we'll be closing sometime.
Exercise by when?
I'm sorry?
What, do they have a time limit for?
December 17th.
So everything wraps around December 17th.
Yep, December 17th is the end of their options unless we were to grant them an extension, but they don't have the right to any more extensions. They did actually file their last extension letter with us about 3 weeks ago or so that gets them through to that period. So.
Do you have any questions, Aaron? Do we have a motion to approve the amendments of purchase and sale agreements with Rockefeller?
So moved.
Eddie? John? Any questions? All those in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Any opposed?
I'm going to sit down now.
Thank you. Just a thought to that. A couple of us have been present at East Allen Township Board of Supervisors meetings over the past month or 6 weeks or so with Rockefeller, looking at those properties in particular, at least Lot 6 in particular. And Rockefeller is proposing development on that site, and they're looking for a rezoning that would be actually in compliance with the Township Planning Commission's plan for the future. But I would say that the response from the public has not been friendly. Might be the easiest way to say it. You know, and I understand that. You know, I think it's natural for public to have questions. They're looking at their greatest asset, which is their home and their property and their township, and I understand that. It's been interesting, two meetings thus far, and there's a third coming up in October, and we'll see where they go. I think staff has acquitted itself well. Our position to date has been that as we are on record to say, we want to be sensitive to the needs and interests of the township. Our job and goal is to create jobs, to create economic activity, but we want to do that in a manner which would be hopefully in sync with their own plans and hopes and goals. And so they're working through that. We've also said that the land that we own is currently being used as farmland. And if we're looking at the fiduciary interest of the airport, that's not the best interest from our standpoint. But we realize that this is a two-pronged approach, and we need their cooperation. And again, our goal is jobs and I think a friendly relationship in the township. So we'll see how that goes. Rockefeller's been leading the charge. Our position has been just as I've stated it, and thus far, I think this discussions, as if you've been through those, are always interesting and always valuable, and you learn a lot. So, thus far, it's been an interesting experience. But someone said, "May you live in interesting times." And they are, Selection committee update. The selection committee has had one meeting since our last get together as an authority board. And we've spent most of our time really assessing direction for the airport, rather than plunging ahead and saying we're going to pick a selection committee or pick a search firm and sign a contract. We thought it was really important for us to get a lay of the land, if you will. It's an opportunity for us to begin looking at structure and how the authority and committees ought to be structured. What are the skill sets that we need in staff? Not just from executive director, but across the board, and are there some holes that we think we can fill? Chuck and I spent about an hour and a half with Tom earlier today talking about that, and I think we will do that again before we move forward. But I think the goal is to make sure that we get the best match we can. I'd have to say thus far Tom has acquitted himself exceptionally well, and I think any of us who've had the opportunity to work with him would say that's certainly been the case. I get the same feedback from staff, and so that's important. And some people have said we haven't missed a beat. As the outsider looking in through a fairly close window, I would say that really is the case, and the team seems to be working well together. So I think we will meet again, and in fact we may move into executive session to have a little discussion about this. But by and large, I think a pace. We don't have to run hell bent for leather, if you will, to make a final decision. I think right now we're moving along at a good pace. But I'll be happy in executive session later. You may have some other questions. We'll be happy to respond to those. Decided to make the public meeting a busy day. So Ann is on the phone. So Ann, I don't know if you have any comments, or should we just move ahead and begin picking these off one by one?
Oh no, please have the staff do it.
All right. So Todd, you back up?
Yeah, I'm all.
All right.
The first item is the 2018 MMO, minimum municipal obligation. Once a year, we have to come, actually it has to be in September, what our minimum municipal obligation is for our pension for the next year. So this year is $817,000. It's a considerable increase from last year. We've talked about that in some of our committee meetings, but those are what the numbers work out to. So it's 817.
What was the driver on that? Just for everybody?
There's a couple things that are the drivers. The first thing for us, if we had our pension meeting, we noticed that we took a hit. Our plan was 100% funded. We went to 87% funded. Some of that because of the market. The market wasn't as good the last year for us in our return since the last time we did our evaluation. The other part is we want to a lower, or I guess a more modern mortality table, so that increased our liability. And the biggest piece is we went from an assumed interest rate of 8% down to 7.5%, which is more in line with.
I think that's even still a little
right,
high.
it is high, but it's you can't get there overnight, and that's a pretty big jump. Yep. So, and that is consistent.
If people didn't live as long, we'd be better off. Is that right?
And but the 7.5 is consistent with what the counties are doing. Both counties we did check are using 7.5%. It is a little concerning. We are concerned about, given that we are in the tail end of a pretty long bull market, and 7.5% from this point forward is a pretty big lift, but that's where we are. So, but that's the 817,000.
What's the delta between this year and last year?
It's about double.
It's roughly another $400,000.
Yes, and that goes back to some of those things we talked about earlier, which we will address a little later in our meeting.
What's the total fund investment? Rough number.
Of the pension, I think they're about 12 million. I think it's about 6 in each.
So we got two groups.
Two groups.
Two groups totally got 12, right?
Yeah, I think that's about right, yes.
Is the thought to continue to look for opportunities to ratchet down that actuarial return assumption?
It is.
Okay, good.
But obviously, it's
Yeah,
painful.
understood.
And
But it hurts worse 10 years from now.
It does hurt worse. 10 years from now. And if you know some of the new pension rules, that shows up on our balance sheet now. So any shortfall we really see there. So again, we made the right move. It's obviously to make our pension a more realistic number of what that liability is, but it definitely took a hit.
So two big hits for pension and depreciation. What they do with the depreciation differently too, so.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I will say that I'm on the retirement board for Hampton County as well. And we are functioning at a 7.5%.
Right. Yeah.
And, while I hear what John's saying, I don't disagree with it. I think we're comfortable proceeding at that, at least for the next year or so, and then reevaluating that again, whether or not we need to change that. Do you know what you guys want to know?
So we need to adopt that by resolution, and so I have a motion to approve the 2018 MMO.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Ed? Any discussion?
One quick thing is, do we do sensitivity analysis going forward on, 7%, 6.5%?
We did that full analysis when we did our pension, which was, I believe, we did it in March or April. We had a full analysis done. The thought is to have one maybe later this year, but it gets a little tight with budget season. So, but yes, that's something you really need a full meeting to go over all the details of just the pension.
I was just try to earmark some time for that, because given we're just making this a lot of adjustments, I want to see what the first year kind of.
Well, we
you don't have to do it every quarter.
But we went into pretty much detail when we had our pension committee meeting, and certainly when he comes out again, we'll definitely brief the board on the finding.
Yep. Okay.
We did get a motion and a second, so all those in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Any opposed? Thank you all. Approval of the reimbursement resolution.
Yes, before I bring this up, I want to mention our guests from BMO, Katie and Kathleen are here. They're kind of observed.
Ladies, stand up and let us greet you. Thanks for coming in. They made a long trip, one from Indianapolis and one from Chicago.
So
we're hoping to get a direct flight to Chicago sometime soon, so we'll work on that.
We do have a direct flight.
We have direct
flights. We have direct flights to Chicago.
We need one to Indianapolis.
Good work. Indianapolis. That was bad. We'll good care of you.
More regular.
But we do appreciate the relationship with BMO Harris and our relationship with both Katie and Kathleen. So this is just an example of that relationship. We had our bond relationship with BMO Harris, but this was for the leased line of credit. If you remember, I'm trying to think, earlier this year we did a formal RFQ, and BMO Harris had the best rate, and we wanted to extend that relationship. We did the actual resolution last month to just approve the line of credit. This is just so it's a reimbursement, so they're requiring a separate resolution, because in this particular case, we are fronting the money and then they're reimbursing us, so they need a separate resolution. So it's a pretty much of a, it kind of outlines the items that we are, that we're thinking of putting on the lease, but it's pretty cut and dry what we're going to do, since we've already approved the lease last month.
Motion to accept? Second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Is there any opposition? Now, the approval of landside comprehensive on-call pavement contractors. Wins the record for the longest titled resolution on the agenda today.
Okay, so first item, technology load here. So the first item that we're looking for approval on is to award contracts to 3 pavement contractors for on-call pavement projects and repairs. So really what we're looking to do is award 3-year term contracts for a total value of $6.5 million. And the reason for that is it basically gives us the opportunity to have more efficient procurement and really go through having contractors on board in emergency situations and for projects that we have. So in going through it, the way in order to get the contractors in an order of who gets the different percentages and values, which I'll go through, is we put together a bid package for almost a task that they would perform, and that one was actually paving the long-term parking lot that was served as the temporary rental lot for the multimodal. So we received bids on that, and then the ranking that you see here is where they fell. So in terms of that $6.5 million, we've allocated them by a percentage, with about 25% at the authority's discretion, depending on where projects fall and timing of the contractors. But just going back quickly to that long-term parking lot, which we want to get done by the end of the year, Lehigh Valley site was the lowest bidder at around $761,000, which again was below the engineer's estimate, which we always like to see. Really, the thing to consider is, if you may recall, is back in May of this year, we actually tried to do this process a little bit of a different way. Is we actually put out to bid for contractors to hold their unit prices. And we got the unit prices in because they had to hold them for 3 years. Prices were inflated, didn't really go with what the engineer was looking for. So we rejected those bids and kind of went back and said, okay, what makes sense for us as the authority to really go through some of these items. So in terms of future projects and tasks, is in the order that you saw, is we'll basically go to the top contractor, have them give us an estimate based on plans and specs for depending on the project. And if they're within the engineer's estimate, 10%, they would be awarded that project. If they were outside of it, we can go to the next one, and so forth and so on. So it gives us a bit more leverage and efficiency in terms of budgeting the projects, but then it just makes it quicker when we have a lot of pavement here that we need to address, especially on our landside area, that really this helps us really get to quicker, more efficiently, and it really helps the passengers with our roadways, parking lots, as well as our tenants as well, some of the hangar parking there as well. So we're looking for approval to award the 3 contractors you see here: Lehigh Valley Site, Highland Materials Incorporated, and Gaver Industries Barker & Barker for a 3-year period for up to $6.5 million.
Motion to accept? Second?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you. Excellent. Any discussion? Larry?
I just have a comment. We've been talking about this process. I think this is one of the best things we've done in a long time. It allows us to respond quickly and accurately, and the project can get off the ground not instantaneously, but pretty darn close. But before you had to go through the entire process, whoever's brainchild this was, kudos to you or to the team who did it. And I think
Can you take the bell,
springboard
Ryan?
off of that now.
Can you take the bell?
I could, but I don't need to.
Probably springboard off that now and find some other things that we can
Yep.
do with multiples that,
Yep.
yeah,
Absolutely.
good job.
Thanks, Larry. Makes a lot of sense. Because we do find that we have often found ourselves going through bids and wasting so much time. You can't be strategic. So a motion to accept? We did that.
I'll make the motion.
All right, we did that. So all those in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Any opposed? All right. Pedestrian tunnel and bridge repairs.
Okay, so this one we're looking for approval for the pedestrian tunnel bridge repairs. This is on the pedestrian walkway tunnel that connects the short-term and long-term parking lots to the terminal, as well as on the upper level, the vestibules, where passengers get dropped off to go to the check-in ticket counters. So just a little bit of background. In the winter of 2017, we had to make some repairs to that tunnel because of some concrete issues that we had. We had one of our consultants come out just to make sure there were no structural issues, which there weren't. But then it was, okay, how do we address this issue going forward to make these repairs? So with this bid, really the repairs that were required is replacing some of the concrete in the area, actually waterproofing and kind of redoing the floors on the upper roadway to prevent water from coming down, which is really a lot of the issue that the concrete was falling off from. Replacing the drainage, and then along the embankment, if you're on the lower level, the brick that's down there that's cracked and kind of spalling in different areas is actually going to be replaced with like a large stone river rock to actually, it'll help the appearance as well as just the drainage aspect of it. So again, we received three bids on this project. Jones Masonry was the lowest at $622,000. It was slightly higher than the engineer's estimate, but it was within that 10% number. The engineer reviewed it, discussed it with the contractor, was comfortable with where they fell in terms of the price as well as their expertise. So the one thing, given the complexity of this work, we added in the contract some warranties to make sure that we're covered for 10, 15 years for some of these repairs. So we wanted to make sure the contractor really had experience to perform these repairs and hold up to those warranties. So we're looking for approval to award the pedestrian tunnel bridge repairs contract to Jones Masonry Restoration Corporation.
Where are they from?
They are, I believe they're local. I'm not sure exactly. I could find out.
Have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second? Thanks, Larry. All those in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Yes. All right.
Harrisburg, right.
Harrisburg, all right. Jeff, thank you for the motion. And now the approval for the bid of Braden Air Park improvements.
Okay. All right, so this one we're definitely excited to go through. I'll make it brief, but there are some good things here. So we've been talking about this for a while in terms of some of the Braden projects. Projects that were identified in our capital program, as well as associated with the $250,000 that we graciously received from Northampton County. So in terms of this bid package, here's the projects that were included, which we talked about before: a lot of the building demolition, the bulk hangar floor resurfacing, and then some of the other items that we'll get to with some general contractors that we've talked about before, with some interior roof repairs and the hangars, those kinds of things. Just in terms of the new terminal building, when we demolished the old one, as most of you know, we did receive allocation for a new grant for a terminal building down at Braden. So in the interim, we're going to have a temporary terminal building out there while we're working through where the proposed building will be located, and then onto the design and construction phase. So we actually received, which is phenomenal, 7 bids for this project. You can see them listed here. The lowest was James Kenny at 307. They're from Collegeville, PA. It was actually below the engineer's estimate, which again is something that we're really fortunate to hear. And again, as I mentioned, $250,000 is going to this project from the Northampton County grant, and then the remaining project cost is covered by the authority, which we had in our capital budget as well as our cash flow. So again, just like all these others, with the engineer evaluate the contractor, review their requirements as well as their experience, and we're looking to award this contract to James R. Kenny Excavating in the amount of $307,346.
Is that contingent?
Yeah, and that's a good point. And that's contingent, just so you know, we put in here, because we did receive the bids yesterday and we wanted to obviously keep this moving forward with the schedule for the grant. This is contingent on confirming their DBE plan at 5% goal that we had included as part of the contract, and then just following up with some of the verification of references, just to confirm.
This must be completed by
December 31st to submit.
Can you tell us what a DBE is?
Yeah, tell us what DBE is.
Sure. It's a disadvantaged business enterprise. It's a process that we have to go through when we receive federal or grant assistance to.
It's like women in minority business, but they're called disadvantaged businesses.
So we had a goal of 5%, so we just have to make sure that they reach it or get as close as they can to that.
Whatever subs they might use.
Correct.
Any questions?
Just a question, what's been the internal, Ryan, with the companies themselves? Do you know if there was any discussion about them selling the old barnwood? I mean, there are companies out there who heavily market that. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's, like I say, a step below where we're talking here. But do you know if that was something that the contractors considered?
I'm sure they did. I know we mentioned it to them at the pre-bid meeting. I'm not sure, with James Kenny if they did, but that was something that was taken into account.
They might be planning it.
And they have, and obviously if they demolish it, they have access to that and they can do whatever they want with it, right?
Correct.
Yep.
Yep.
I was going to say, well, Glenn, do you want to make that motion? I suspected so. Maybe. Ben, all right. GA committee gets the second. Larry, any question?
I don't have a question, I just had a comment.
Sure.
We're talking about Braden Park. Some of you know Vern Moyer. I understand he fell and broke his hip.
Oh, really?
He's home recovering. Or he's excuse me, he's not home, covering in the hospital, somewhere up there, so.
Yeah. Vern's a good guy, is a good guy.
I love it.
Absolutely. All those in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Any opposed? Congratulations.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank Northampton County. And thanks, Ryan, for getting things moving. Tom, interim director's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a few items in terms of major ongoing projects. We continue to work on our master plan update, as we referred to earlier. Our third public workshop will actually take place in early November timeframe. We anticipate completing that study in early summer next year. We also did start our air cargo apron expansion project back on the 12th of September, so that will add a 6th aircraft parking position out at the air cargo apron that we anticipate will be available by the end of November. So working
Just in
hard.
time.
Just in time, right?
Yep.
Working hard to get that one completed. In terms of upcoming events, we do have our Customer Appreciation Week, and that's going on from October 2nd through the 6th. We'll have events here at ABE as well as at Queen City and at Braden Airport, so we're looking forward to that. We will have our 4th TSA Pre-Check Enrollment Center here at ABE again. We just had one in July, but this is going to run from October 2nd through the 13th, so you can register online. If you are interested in TSA Pre-Check, you can do that at identigo.com. Also, coming up on Saturday, October 14th, we're going to have our Winged Warriors 5K. It's a run or walk. So we're excited to have that here at ABE. A portion of that 5K will be actually on part of the runway here. We're closing our crosswind runway and able to have the track take you out on the airfield a little bit. So that'll be a lot of fun for folks. This benefits the American Cancer Society. You can sign up at flylvia.com, and that race starts at 8 a.m. In terms of other issues, we did provide copies of our 2016 annual report in front of you. You hopefully had a chance to kind of look through that. We did send that out electronically. Looking to do that on an annual basis and get that to you probably in the July timeframe going forward. We think it turned out very well. And then back on September 15th, we did see an additional flight from ATI, one of our cargo operators. So currently that takes us to 5 flights a day. This flight is operating to Ontario, California. One other thing I just would be remiss to not mention would be Allegiant Airlines. We talked about them a little bit tonight, but they had their comprehensive audit of our ABE station here back in August. And kudos to Connie Phillip and her team. They received a perfect audit, 0 discrepancies on that, and they were recognized by Allegiant for that. So
Congratulations.
Congratulations. And we're still waiting to see what happens in Washington with regards to the AIP reauthorization, which is set to expire on Saturday, September 30th. We're hoping for a passing of a stopgap measure.
We got a couple things going on before September 30th.
Correct. To avoid a partial shutdown of FAA, which could impact some timing of grant funds and things for us. So we're hopeful. And that concludes my report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Are we looking at all at the initiative to privatize air traffic controllers and the whole piece?
It has been discussed. It was part of the initial bill, except for the extension. I think it's certainly being pushed by A4A and that side of the industry, but there's certainly
A4A is
Airlines for America. So there's a lot of question about the benefit of that, and certainly I know from a general aviation perspective, there's not a lot of support for that element in the bill. So
GA is adamantly opposed. They allege the airlines want it done because they claim that it's affecting scheduling. By privatization, they'll improve their scheduling, but the GA says that's not the issue. It's really capacity at the airports, and so it's not going to change anything. So it comes up every couple of years, and so.
Any questions of Tom? Then There are a couple issues we ought to address in executive session. So those refer to anticipated litigation and personnel matters. And so I'll entertain a motion to move into executive session. Second? All those in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Any opposed? Thank you.
For the record, we will be discussing possible resolution of the federal case brought by the firefighters. That's one topic, and the other will be a discussion of the status of the collective bargaining process that's ongoing with the Teamsters.
All right. And we will be taking action when we return. I anticipate we'll be taking action when we return. I think for the first two issues, we'll have staff here. If we get into a discussion a quick discussion relative to personnel, then I'll excuse the staff. But
I'm released.
No.
no, you're not released.
Nice try, Frank.
Stay.
But contrary to your boss, our goal here is always to be out within an hour to an hour and a half. Tony managed that once in 2 years, so we'll get an executive session. Everybody still has a job.
Thank you.
And we have two items to deal with, and I'll ask our solicitor to open both of those up for discussion.
The first issue relates to the pending litigation in federal court wherein the firefighters brought a lawsuit, and that's been proceeding in the federal district court, and there is a proposal to resolve that litigation with a payment in the amount of, the total was $45,000 that would include in every respect and involve complete releases and termination of the litigation. So that's the proposal that was presented by counsel, Mr. Kinsey, and it is before the board as to whether you approve that or disapprove it.
So entertain a motion to approve this.
Second.
Yeah. Made in second. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Any opposed? Then, Mr. Solicitor, would you bring us up to date on the second?
The second matter related to the status of collective bargaining negotiations with the Teamsters Union, and there is a tentative agreement or proposal that the matter be resolved by entering into a new collective bargaining agreement with the Teamsters Union. Mr. Stout, do you have anything that you want to add to that?
I think essentially a 2-year term that would run through the end of June 2019.
A motion to accept the proposal as outlined? Motion and second, Aldo. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I promised Sylvette an adjournment by 7, and I missed it by 4 minutes. Just one last point. Some time ago, Connie made an excellent presentation to the executive committee on fuel, how we made money selling fuel and what the costs are and how we could determine prices and so on. And I was thinking, Ed and Todd make a great presentation to us on finance, but it might be interesting for us to really see, how we do this and what we do and where the money comes from and who's in charge. And so if we can do it, I'd be interested in having Connie make that presentation in 5 or 10 minutes at a subsequent authority meeting. And then secondly, when we have the opportunity, we've met at Queen City, we've met at Brayton, we've met here in the evening. I'd like to go out and see the cargo operation. And I don't know if the rest of you would, but I think it would be kind of interesting. We're faced with some challenges there. We know we're going to have to do some expansion in cargo services and warehousing and so on. We've already made some. If you'd be interested in going out, I think we might be, if we can find a way to accommodate a meeting in that venue, I'd be interested in doing that. Would that be fair?
Yeah.
I think we need to know, the business of what we're doing. We're all familiar with checking our bags and paying for our tickets, but we haven't seen the rest of it. I know one time we had a contract here, and I think we have 16 escalators and how many elevators, and I've only ever been on one elevator and one one escalator, so it was kind of interesting for me to make the tour. Is there any other business for us to discuss? I think a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Staff, thank you very much. Appreciate the time, extra time this evening, and job's well done. Tom, thank you very much.
It's good to see you.
I could eat that cookie without my wife seeing it on TV, so that's a good thing.
Oh,
You're able to get a little bit of relaxation here.
No, I know.
2018.